Hello everyone, Fabrice the Artist here, back with another tutorial video. And today I'm going to be demonstrating and explaining to you guys how I did the armor of his left shoulder, or I guess his right shoulder rather. So the first thing I'm doing is strengthening the outline of some of the details on the armor, such as the damage, and I'm just strengthening that outline just so that I don't lose it when I apply that charcoal powder to the page. So what I'm doing is first adding that very basic foundational layer of charcoal powder just to get the overall relative tone and value of the shoulder pad accurate before I try to do anything else. And as you can imagine, it's important to sharpen your tools, folks. So as I was applying that charcoal powder to the page, I did fill in some of the gap where the highlight would be on the edge of the armor in the background. So what I'm doing here with the Faber Castell Perfection Eraser is just cleaning up that white line that I just kind of covered up with some of that charcoal powder. And one thing you'll see me do as well is go back into these little sections where the damage is and just re-highlighting them, just drawing them back in so that I don't lose where they are. And the Faber Castell Pitt oil based pencil is great for outlining this section because it doesn't very easily erase when I go on top of it with that charcoal powder. And what I'm doing here is what you'll notice is that the white highlight on the edge of the armor between the background and the rest of the shoulder pad is not completely uniformly a solid white line. So I'm just adding some lighter details to almost blend in that white highlight into the rest of the armor so that it looks a little bit more like a gradual faded away look. And you're going to intermittently see me come in and out and grab the graphite pencils and add a little bit more details where the outline may have not captured it just yet. So, for example, this little thin line that is going up and down the white highlight there, just to add a little bit more shape to that armor before I go in and lay down more charcoal powder. And here I'm just doing the same thing I did earlier with that damaged spot on the top of the armor. I'm just using that Faber Castell Pitt oil pencil to strengthen that outline so that I make sure that I don't lose it, or at least remember where it's at as I continue to work with the brush and the charcoal powder. Now, I'm pretty sure that I do end up losing these little sections later on in the video, but that's okay. I still think that this is an important step to take. And I think the reason that I was less worried about it this time was because, unlike drawing like facial features or eyes or things like that, where the proportions are really, really important to make them look like the person, if I lose the little outline of the section of the damage on the armor, it's not really a big deal because I can just draw them back in later as close as I can, and it'll look good enough anyway, because who cares if it looks exactly like the picture, because it's just damage to the armor anyway. We're not trying to capture the perfect likeness of a face. And I'm going to be using General's 6B charcoal pencil right here, because the section of the jacket next to this shoulder pad is going to require a lot of texture, and it's pretty much perfectly black with some little bits of texture that I can erase into that charcoal. So that's why I'm already outlining this armor with this charcoal. And oftentimes in these videos, you're going to see me kind of bounce back and forth between things that I'm doing. And in this case, I'm using the Faber Castell Pitt oil pencil to strengthen the outline of the background, the edge, that line that is the edge of the armor in the background, just to make that nice solid black line, really to make that shoulder pad pop from the background. And what I'm doing here is just adding a thin layer of that same Pitt oil pencil on top of the charcoal, just to try to make it just that little bit darker, as I find that this tool applies very well on top of the charcoal powder. And here I'm just using a thick blending stump and some charcoal powder to try to blend in this charcoal a little bit more, blend in that Pitt oil pencil into the charcoal. And I'm also trying to apply yet another layer of charcoal powder to the armor to try to get certain parts a little bit darker and make it a little bit more uniform across the shoulder. So what I'm trying to do is I'm looking at that reference picture and I'm trying to figure out which parts of it are slightly darker than parts next to it, right? So like the shoulder pad isn't the same tone the whole way through, right? There are parts that are slightly darker, and that's what gives it that curved effect or that depth effect. So this is pretty much the part that I was talking about earlier in the video, where I end up losing those sections anyway. What I was doing wasn't really working, drawing with the blending stump around these little sections of damage. It just wasn't creating an even effect. So I pretty much just said forget that and just blend it in with my fingers so that it's nice and uniform, and I can just erase these sections right back in, as I'm doing right now with the Tombow Mono Zero eraser. So sometimes it just takes a little bit of freehand drawing or a little bit of memory of where those sections are. And if you can even retain the slightest outline of some of these sections, even if you blended it in, you can still salvage it just by just barely being able to make out where the outline of that section was before you blended it into the rest of the armor. So where I went in earlier with the Pitt oil pencil to strengthen those outlines, you can see that I didn't completely erase them. So because the Pitt oil pencil is quite resistant to being erased, I find, especially with a brush, it doesn't blend in very well. At least the thick lines that I'm making here don't blend in very well. So I'm just taking another go at it and strengthen them yet once again. So this step right here is where I make the shoulder really pop, especially against that dark background. This is the reason I used the Faber Castell eraser pencil earlier in the video to erase that white border between the armor and the background, so that I could more easily apply this General's Charcoal white layer on the edge. Because if I were to just simply do this on top of the charcoal, it would end up looking a little bit too blue. So this is going to create a really nice, strong, white, bright highlight on that edge of the armor, almost to the point where it looks like it's just popping off the page. And what I'm doing is I'm pressing a lot harder on the outer edge nearest to the background with this charcoal white pencil, and then very lightly kind of adding a thinner layer, almost blending it in right now to the charcoal powder that I laid down earlier. So what I'm trying to do is blend it in as much as I can with just the charcoal white pencil itself, and then when it looks as good as I can make it look just using that technique, I go in with a clean firm art brush and just blend it into the rest of the powder like I am doing right here. And you have to be a little bit careful because it can look a little bit too blue. But if you watch closely, you can see that where I'm blending it in with the brush, it looks just like it's a very gradual, from super bright white gradually into that charcoal powder layer with virtually no blue residue effect from having it blend in too much with the charcoal, because I already gradually try to blend it in with just the pencil before brushing it in further. So now I'm just going in for some final touches with the Pitt oil pencil, and you could use a graphite pencil for this too, but I find the Pitt oil pencil to be just a little bit darker. So the details on the reference picture, there's just like these very subtle squiggly lines just to add that little bit extra bit of texture to the armor. And because the shading on the armor isn't entirely uniform, I'm just going in with one final step with the Pitt oil pencil where certain parts are just slightly darker than the rest. For example, going around this little damaged section of the armor on the right here that I'm working on right here is it creates that depth almost to the point where it is like indented a little bit. Making it a little darker around this spot on the right makes it look like it's sunken in. Anyway, folks, that concludes today's video. I appreciate you guys following along this far, and I hope you guys learned a thing or two. Please stay tuned for a couple more Mandalorian process videos to come shortly. Thank you for watching, and have yourself a fantastic day.